The Azores are 9 islands in the Atlantic Ocean, sitting about a third of the way from Europe to North America. A history textbook will tell you that the Portuguese explorers discovered this beautiful archipelago in the 15th century. Until then, they were uninhabited. The islands still belong to Portugal, so there seems to be no controversy or mystery here, except for the fact that some researchers think the Azores were home to an ancient civilization from thousands of years ago. Others support the idea that the famous Atlantis itself was here. In 2010, archaeologists announced that they found some structures on the islands which looked like they were from the Stone Age. If that's true, it would mean that there was a civilization back then which was advanced enough to travel this far and settle on the remote islands. A special scientific commission studied the matter and concluded that those structures were natural rock formations or had a more modern origin. So the first settlers were supposed to have been the Portuguese. It didn't stop some enthusiastic scientists from further research. They analyzed the DNA of mice from the Azores and found that it had the same genetic characteristics as house mice from Northern Europe. The little rodents couldn't have sailed this far without humans, so it looks like the first people had arrived at the Azores before the Portuguese, and the plot thickens. Dr. Felix Rodriguez, who works at the University of the Azores, is determined to find out exactly when it happened. He's studying the megalithic structures found in the Azores. Similar structures found in Western Europe and the Mediterranean date back to the Neolithic age. According to Dr. Rodriguez, the oldest findings are from 4,200 years ago. It's not clear when civilizations left them. The professor identified 7 megalithic structures in one complex as dolmens for the deceased. The cavities are all cylindrical in shape and definitely don't look like a natural formation. The material from the cavities turned out to be at least 2,500 years old. There are also some pieces of ceramics that seem to be even older. It looks like the rocks in the area had been lifted. You can see it by the small waves left by lava. It's thick and sticky, so it can't leave vertical marks. Someone must have moved the rock from its horizontal position. Another interesting finding is some stone anchors with holes found by the sea. Similar ones were used in the Mediterranean and on the Atlantic coast of Europe, dating back to 1000 and 2000 BCE. The 15th century Portuguese were advanced sailors and never used stone anchors, only metal ones. The scientists also managed to find a structure built right in the volcanic tuff. It looks somewhat similar to the ones built in the Mediterranean that are at least 2,000 years old. These structures are called columbariums and were used to store the ashes of the deceased. They also found something resembling an oven next to it, so they could be a part of one complex. There's also a basin in the middle, and it's not the only one on the island. It looks like they had a special meaning to their builders. There are channels around the construction. They connect the 4 basins, and the sun lights each of them at different times of the year. It was all carefully planned, as they were lit the brightest during winter and summer solstices and autumn and spring equinoxes. The water passed through all the basins and went directly into the sea. It could have been a purifying ritual. Now, some people are skeptical about the findings and believe they're all parts of a fortress from the 16th century. Professor Rodriguez is determined to prove it's all much, much older. There must have been some ancient civilization here that could have left because of the volcanoes that go crazy every 50 years. Antonieta Costa, a postdoctoral student at the University of Porto in Portugal, is also sure that the first people came to the Azores in prehistoric times. She has studied standing stones with small openings, explained as cuts for quarrying the stones. Costa believes they are part of a calendar system. She noticed that none of the slits in the rocks were aligned with the cardinal east direction. The slits closest to it are smaller than the ones facing other directions, so it can't be just a coincidence. It also looks like the slits are aligned with the solstices, and that's what makes Costa think it could be a calendar. She also thinks the inscriptions left on slabs of bedrock on the islands are much like those maps that were left on the rocks during the Stone Age in mainland Europe. Another interesting theory about the Azores is that it could have been the location of the famous Atlantis, which was lost under the sea. Since the Azores archipelago is in the middle of an ocean, it could technically be a perfect place for that. A 20th century scholar quoted Plato to prove this theory was right. The Greek philosopher suggested that Atlantis was in between the continents. The coins and sculptures supposedly found in the Azores when the Portuguese just arrived also point that there was someone else present there. And way more recently, in 2013, a sailor found a huge structure looking like a pyramid off the Azores coast. It was most likely a large submarine volcano, but it's much cooler to think it was some big deal in Atlantis, right? Peru has its own mystery. Amid the desert, you can find some eerie marks called the Nazca lines. They're known as geoglyphs and were created more than 2,000 years ago by the people of the Nazca culture. Thanks to a dry climate and strong winds in the desert, most of the Nazca lines have reached our day. To create them, Nazca people removed the top layer of the pebbles and revealed the soil beneath the ground. The color of the soil changes from reddish-brown to yellowish-gray, so the lines always look different. Most of the geoglyphs depict plants and animals. You can clearly see a monkey, a whale, a condor, a hummingbird, a spider, various flowers, trees, and other plants. There are also some geometric shapes, such as triangles, trapezoids, and spirals. Since they were discovered in the 1920s, scientists have offered different explanations for the lines. Some say that in Nazca culture, people ascribe special significance to these motifs, so they probably created these shapes for deities in the sky to see. Others believe they were a sort of astronomical calendar, and animal sketches were modeled after groups of stars. This theory was proved wrong, so the purpose of the lines remains a mystery. Another place that leaves many questions is Nimrut Mountain in Turkey. This mountain has a complex of monuments with temples and tombs. It was built by the Kingdom of Commagene, which ruled here around the 1st century BCE. There are statues of King Antiochus, 2 lions, 2 eagles, Zeus, Hercules, and Apollo. Archaeologists found the ruins of this complex at the end of the 19th century. They thought it had been built by the Assyrians. Then, some of the most famous scientists of the time came here and found an inscription in Greek. It had details about the sculptures and the names of important members of the Commagene royal family. It looked like it had been put there for future visitors. The scientists established that the statues used to be full-size figures. Changes in temperature, strong winds, snow, and the bright sun didn't leave them a chance to last in all their original glory. Plus, the complex is in an earthquake zone. So all you can see now is mostly the heads of the statues. They look incredibly complex and large for their time. The biggest question is, how did the people who lived thousands of years ago manage to create such huge sculptures on top of the mountain? It's obvious that they worked on shaping the limestone blocks up there and not on the ground. So, stay tuned. We'll keep an eye on this. Rekhat structure is a giant formation in the Sahara that looks exactly like a giant bullseye. It's so wide that you can see it from space. Even the CIA got interested in it. In 1965, they planned a flyover looking for geomagnetic anomalies. The findings are still classified. Perhaps the theories are true, and this place is truly the lost city of Atlantis. Now, Atlantis supposedly sank beneath the waves, but recent discoveries are pointing us in a different direction. This is an ancient story that goes far back in time, and Plato was the first to mention it. The place had loads of greenery and a curious structure. 3 concentric circles of land surrounding 2 circles of water. 2 key quotes from Plato's writing suggest that Atlantis might not have been a typical island in the middle of the ocean. Plus, Atlantis had a major influence from Africa and Europe, challenging the idea of it being in the Atlantic. It turns out that the Eye of the Sahara and Atlantis look alike. When astronauts saw the Eye of Sahara from above, they initially suspected a meteorite impact crater. But the rings of the structure matched the layout described of Atlantis. More importantly, the Sahara wasn't always a desert. It turned from a tropical region into a desert around 11,000 years ago. Researchers found evidence of a massive river called the Tamaracet that could have sustained a community. This river flowed toward the Rekhat structure, aligning with Plato's description. The Trans-Saharan Seaway ran through the Sahara 50 to 100 million years ago. The sea allegedly destroyed Atlantis around 11,500 years ago, likely due to a rapid rise in sea level caused by the end of the Ice Age. NASA's worldview imagery shows patterns consistent with this theory. Those concentric rings might be a key to unlocking the secrets of our planet's evolution over millions of years. They're shaped by erosion on resilient rock layers, creating a spooky pattern of ridges and troughs. The central peak stands proud at 1,300 feet. The central part has undergone a significant erosion makeover, revealing a circular structure with a raised peak. Unlike impact craters, the Eye of the Sahara flaunts a striking balance and symmetry. Some say it results from rock uplift, sculpted by wind and water. Others think it's an ancient anticline, eroded to reveal its concentric glory. Then there's a salt diapir theory, suggesting that salt's buoyancy sculpted this beauty. Dating techniques have proved that it formed 541 to 252 million years ago, give or take a million or two. Ancient tools are scattered around the outer rings of the structure near riverbeds. Some older stone tools have also been spotted in the same areas. And still, even though some spear points from the Neolithic period have been found, there aren't many signs that people were living there back then. The area seems to have been used for short-term activities like hunting and making tools. There are other unearthly mysteries that haunt our world. One such enigma is in Norway. The ominous Hessdalen light phenomenon, also known as the Valley of Lights, leaves scientists confused. This valley is 10 miles wide. It's quite isolated, but a peculiar blue box sits high on the hillside, equipped with cameras scanning the valley. The unsettling saga began in the 1980s, when the night sky over Hessdalen erupted with burning fireballs, a recurring spectacle that sent shivers down the spines of those who witnessed it. This wasn't a fleeting occurrence, rather it became a regular thing. Terrified locals reported encounters with these unexplained luminous phenomena, some of which happened near their homes. Unease spread like wildfire. At its peak, there were about 20 sightings every week. The phenomenon made its way into newspapers, magazines, and media worldwide. Soon, people flocked to the valley, hoping to see the lights themselves. In 1984, experts joined the fray, armed with sophisticated instruments like magnetometers, radiometers, and other ometers. What they encountered was mind-bending, lights that defied explanation. Some moved at a leisurely pace, while others raced through the sky at an astonishing 19,000 miles per hour. People tried to explain these lights: airplanes, distant reflections, ball lightning, satellites, planets, meteors. But the speed and how these lights danced ruled out all those theories. We're slowly approaching another mysterious place. This is the greatest subglacial lake among Antarctica's 675 known lakes. It can easily hide unknown life forms. This lake is beneath the East Antarctic ice sheet. Dive about 2.5 miles under the ice, and there you'll see Lake Vostok, located at 1,600 feet below sea level. This lake is 155 miles long and 31 miles wide at its broadest point. With an average depth of 1,400 feet, it's also the world's sixth largest by volume. It's like an underwater city with lofty pillars and deep basins. The secret lake was discovered in 1993, yet it had been waiting to be found down there for over 2,000 years, collecting ancient secrets. In 2012, scientists drilled through the ice, creating the longest ice core ever. They pierced the ice all the way to the lake's surface. The year 2013 brought an unexpected twist when the tranquil waters erupted during the extraction of an ice core, mixing with drilling fluids. Then they got a pristine water sample in 2015. Some believe there might be previously unknown life forms down there, since it's a fossil water reserve that's been untouched for millions of years. That could be a lot like those speculated ice-covered oceans on moons like Europa and Enceladus. It all started with a theory in the 19th century, suggesting fresh water lurking under Antarctic ice sheets. Then, in 1955, seismic soundings hinted at a subglacial lake, and by the 90s, satellite data confirmed Lake Vostok's existence. Now, Lake Vostok isn't alone. In 2005, they found an island in the middle of the lake. Then, two smaller lakes joined the party. They suspect that a secret network of subglacial rivers might link these lakes. Now, very far away from Antarctica, in Venezuela, Catatumbo lightning presents a sinister light show at the junction of the Catatumbo River and Lake Maracaibo. This unsettling lightning phenomenon happens at about 140 to 160 nights a year, going on for 10 hours a day, and can flash up to 280 times in a single hour. The frequency of this lightning show changes with the seasons and from year to year. There was a break between January to March in 2010, causing a bit of worry that it might vanish forever. As the sun sets, winds from the east start picking up speed. The strong wind is called a nocturnal low-level jet, like what you see in the Great Plains of North America. These winds bring moisture, mostly from the Caribbean and the lake itself. This humid air hits high mountain ridges, causing thunderstorms to form over the mountains. Thanks to the ongoing wind situation, more thunderstorms appear as the night goes on. This pattern repeats itself, and is why this area has the highest annual lightning rate globally. The next place scientists cannot explain is in China. That is the Longyu Caves. They have lofty slanted roofs and sturdy pillars. The spot remained hidden for centuries. These human-made caverns, built around 2,000 years ago, decided to reveal themselves only in the 90s. Local farmers drained some ponds and unveiled 5 massive caverns. Further digging exposed an additional 19 smaller caves. They range from 60 to 110 feet in width and 26 to 50 feet in height. Archaeologists found historical relics from the reign of Emperor Zhuan of Han, dating back to over 2,000 years ago. Now, how did these caves survive for more than 2 millennia without falling apart? No ancient records explain the way they were crafted either. The walls show chisel marks, hinting at some layer-by-layer chiseling action, but the exact construction process is still a head-scratcher.
There's a tiny island surrounded by the stunning clear Red Sea and a bustling underwater world. Zabargad, also known as St. John's Island, has no trees and consists mostly of peridotite, which is rich in peridot. And before you Google it, peridotite is a gemstone that has the nickname the Evening Emerald because of its sparkling green hue. Some historians believe Cleopatra herself loved peridots, and that lady could afford any jewels in the world. Geologists believe peridot forms as a result of the spreading of the seafloor. When the Earth's crust decides to part ways, rocks from deep down get pushed up to the surface. That's exactly how our treasure island formed. The African and the Asiatic continental plates bumped into each other, and rocks in the lower crust went above sea level. Peridot also comes from meteorites that have crashed into Earth, but that's really rare. Its color ranges from a brown-green color to yellowish-green to pure green. Yellowish-green is the most common shade you'll see in jewelry. This color is possible thanks to a good amount of iron in the stone. The deposits of this beauty are spread all across the world, from Vietnam to Arizona and Hawaii, Tanzania, South Africa, Sri Lanka, and Norway. And then, of course, there's Zabargad. So, this place is geologically unique as it's an island built of uplifted mantle, and it's also the oldest and longest known source of peridots in the world. The first people came here for the gemstones many centuries ago. Famous Roman philosopher Pliny the Elder mentioned in his writings that pirates had discovered Zabargad's treasures in the year 500 before the current era. The beautiful green rocks made their way to Queen Bernice of the Roman Empire. They came from the ancient trading port Berenike on the edge of Egypt's eastern desert. When the city fell in the 6th century, all work stopped, and the island with all its treasures stood alone for hundreds of years. In the 19th century, British explorers found the beautiful green island in the Red Sea and figured out it was the one described by Pliny the Elder a long time ago. Turkey did some mining here in the 20th century. Over just 4 years, they managed to collect over $2 million in peridots. They sent the gemstones to France for cutting. The work conditions on the island were nothing like a tropical fairy tale you could imagine. There was no drinking water for workers, so they had to install a gas-powered water condenser. Now, this territory belongs to the Elba National Park System. Most people come here to see the underwater beauties of the reefs. But if you look above the water, you can still see some beautiful sparkling peridоts. If Christmas Island in Australia is on your travel list, plan the trip wisely. If you end up there in October or November when the wet season begins, you won't be able to enjoy a walk around. Red crabs cover the whole island like a blanket. And it's not one of those fluffy blankets you want to wrap yourself into. Over 100 million crabs are on a mission to reach the shore alive, marking a crucial phase in their life cycle. For the majority of the year, these red crabs reside in burrows and rock crevices. They have fruits, berries, fallen leaves, and various organic matter to keep them going. But when the dry season is over and the moon is in a specific phase, they know it's time to go. When they reach the coast of the Indian Ocean after several days of migration, they create deep burrows where females will eventually hatch their eggs. Once the burrows are ready, the male crabs return to the rainforests and the females stay at the beach for at least 12 days to keep the family going. The new parents are so smart, they follow the moon to pick the perfect moment with a milder tide to carry their eggs to the water. Once they hatch, the crabs bring their new family members back inland. There, they wait for the rainy season again to keep the circle of life going. To safeguard this magic, authorities close road in areas where crab migration takes place. Japan has a brand new addition to its archipelago. The world's newest landmass literally popped up in November 2023. This unnamed island is just over 300 feet in diameter. It's made of pumice and tuff left by an undersea volcano that kicked off its eruptions in October. The volcanic hustle has quieted down since then, and the waves are eroding chunks of the newly found land. Without lava flows to create a sturdy protective crust over the soft volcanic debris, the future of this freshly formed island is unstable. Similar islands had popped up before but were short-lived and vanished once volcanic activity ceased. An island born in 2021 the same way is still visible today though, so the newborn island might have some life prospects. If not, we're likely to see more territories like this. Japan is super rich in active volcanoes on land, with over 100 in its collection. If you make friends with the Uros people living in the Lake Titicaca area and ask them for their address to send a postcard, they will have a hard time answering. Their ancestors from more than 500 years ago came up with a brilliant invention to protect themselves from the Incas. They built islands from totora roots and reeds that could be moved away from danger deep into the lake. Totora plants help the local community a lot since it's water-resistant and is used for all sorts of things, from building boats to roofs and mattresses. The islets are even edible, and the flowers of the plant they're made of are used for tea. So there are around 120 islets still preserved, and over 1,000 people can live on them. From 2 to 6 families share one islet home. Since there's no need to run away from the Incas anymore, they need to make sure the islets stay in one place. Every 15 to 20 days, the reeds forming the islets decay and need to be replaced. To prevent constant drifting, locals use eucalyptus rods as anchors, firmly securing the islets. Despite their small size, these islets have 2 spoken languages. The residents craft their fabric and create stunning outfits. Solar panels provide sufficient power for them to have light and even TVs. The main islet has a radio station, and the locals have embraced tourism. You can make a reservation online and experience the floating life yourself. Some islands pop out of nowhere, and others disappear without a trace. One of the most famous so-called phantom islands is Hy-Brasil off the coast of Ireland. Before you ask, no, it doesn't have anything to do with Brazil. Hy is a variation of I, which means island, and Brazil comes from the root bres, meaning mighty, great, beautiful in Irish, and it gave the name to one of the local deities. This tiny mist-covered island was first mapped in 1325, but later attempts to pinpoint its exact location didn't come to one result. So, legend has it that the island appears only once in 7 years, and even those who claim to have seen it say they had just sailed right through it without bumping into any land. Captain John Nisbet shared the story of how he had not only spotted Hy-Brasil, but got stranded on it with his crew. According to him, the island boasted a castle and was mostly uninhabited. There was even an encounter with an ancient grave gentleman who shared the island's ancient history over a lavish feast. In the late 15th century, a series of expeditions set sail from Bristol to find the famous island. All attempts failed, and Hy-Brasil disappeared from the maps in 1865. We might never find out if it was there in the first place, but it's a beautiful story anyway.
You're on a ship when you notice some water foaming nearby. It looks as if a huge vessel just sunk there, but you don't see any debris. Steam is rising over the water, and large bubbles appear on the surface. In a couple of minutes, you see a small piece of land appear right in front of your eyes. It's releasing flames and lava. Millions of gallons of water evaporate in the mouth of the volcano. Frightened, you get away from this place. For the next 3 years, the small island covered with volcanoes will slowly be emerging from the water. Every day, it'll erupt and fill the sky with black ash. When the ash settles, it'll get mixed with the water and form the shore. This eruption lasted 3 years, and finally, by 1967, the island of Surtsey on the southern coast of Iceland was fully formed. Surtsey is one of the few islands that have emerged from the depths to the surface of the sea. But it's almost impossible to get here. The island has a unique ecological system, and scientists want to find out how it's going to develop without human influence. Only a few people from all over the world have permission to walk around on the island. For many decades, people's minds have been occupied with the mystery of Easter Island, a remote piece of volcanic soil far away in the Pacific Ocean. But our planet hosts thousands of such lonely islands. What is so peculiar about this one? The mystery is concealed not in the island itself, but giant stone statues covering it. Who created the world-famous huge stone heads? Did they serve any specific purpose? Rapa Nui, which is the name given to Easter Island by its first inhabitants, is the territory of Chile and is situated in the southern Pacific Ocean. And it is so far away that you can easily consider it one of the most distant places on the world map. The only transport that can take you there is a plane. If you want to get to this destination point, you will need to spend 5 hours on board, flying from Santiago to Easter Island. The statues carry the name Moai. They started to be carved at some point between the 13th and 15th centuries. Rapa Nui statues are easily recognized thanks to their peculiar faces. They have long noses, wide chins, rectangular ears, heavy brows, and deeply set eyes. It is quite curious that the nostrils curl in the way fish hooks do. Firstly, people thought that the statues were made up only by their heads. But surprisingly, it turned out that there are full bodies that are attached to the heads. It was discovered during excavations in May 2012. The bodies were just hidden underground. Still, the heads of the statues, visible from the first sight, make up 3/8 of each statue's size. As for the arms, they were carved against the bodies, resting in different positions. Most statues, 834 out of 887, were carved from the material called tuff, which is, in fact, compressed volcanic ash. Curiously, all the statues except one faced inland. It means their backs are turned to the ocean. Perhaps the reason for that was the belief that the statues were the protectors of the villagers. That's why they overlooked the settlement. The only statues not fitting into this pattern can be found at Ahu Akivi, a sacred place for the people of Rapa Nui. People keep wondering how the statues of such a huge weight have been distributed all around the island. What's more, in 1722, visitors found a small local population between 1,500 and 3,000 people. How could it correlate with the hundreds of statues on the island? The mystery surrounding the way Rapa Nui people could move the statues challenged the researchers, not letting them back off. In the 1980s, some of them decided to recreate a statue and check the possibility of moving it around. Several decades passed, and another group of American scientists proved that the islanders could tie ropes encircling the huge statues and move them with a walking motion. They backed up their theory with practice, moving a full-size replica using this method. Actually, their idea can explain why Rapa Nui folklore states that the statues were walking with the help of magic. It explains the way the statues were transported to their designated places. Our next stop is Brazil, far from the center of Sao Paulo. That's where you can find an island that's almost impossible to get to, but if you succeed, you're unlikely to leave it. It's called Snake Island. There's no other place on the planet with such a high concentration of snakes. They are the only owners of the island since no other animals can survive among them. The golden lancehead. They are one of the most venomous species in the world. Their venom is very powerful and fast-acting. If you let this reptile bite a raw piece of meat, the place around the bite will start to melt. Count me out. Imagine you're on this island and the snakes don't bite you. The most interesting thing you can find there is an old lighthouse. It's hidden in the dense foliage of trees. People lived on the island a long time ago. Rumor has it that the last keepers were in the lighthouse when the snakes broke in. No one has lived there ever since. How these unique snakes appeared on the island is still a mystery. The most popular legend claims that a pirate came there a long time ago. He hid a treasure somewhere on the island. Then, he left the snakes in the spot where the chest was hidden. The pirate hoped the reptiles would scare people away from his gold coins and jewelry. Since then, a few snakes have managed to increase their population thousands of times. And some of them, reportedly, are wearing jewelry. No, not really. Even if you wanted to get to the island for some reason, the patrol services would stop you. Only a few people in special protective suits can get there to conduct scientific research. Susie gets here on a small boat. As soon as she steps on the ground, she turns on the live broadcast on her phone. She records dolls hanging on trees all over the island. They have different clothes, different sizes, and faces. There are about a dozen creepy toys on every tree. Rain and hot sun deform the toys' faces. They are covered with moss and greenery and have taken eerily scary forms. There are rumors they come to life at night. Wanna check? One of the subscribers writes, "No problem," Susie agrees. The sun is going down below the horizon. Darkness falls on the forest. Susie is wandering among the trees. The moon lights her way. She makes a fire to get warm. At this moment, she hears a strange sound. She notices some movement out of the corner of her eye. The phone turns off. Susie looks up and sees one of the dolls, lit up by the flames, is turning its head in her direction. Susie screams and runs away from this place. Of course, the doll didn't move. You can notice a little bird sitting behind the toy's head. A few days later, Susie found out that one of the Mexico City locals had moved to the island in the 50s and filled it with toys. He collected dolls from landfills and canals around the island. He spent several days decorating every tree. In the beginning, it looked strange and exciting for tourists. Then, as the dolls began to age and rot, this place became more attractive for people. There are several legends about the reasons for his obsession. Okay, Susie's had enough of these mysteries and creepy places. Now she wants to admire something majestic that was created by nature. She arrives in California's Sequoia National Park, where the most giant trees in the world grow. She's looking with an open mouth at the biggest tree in the world, a giant sequoia. Its name is General Sherman, and it's about 2,000 years old. The volume of this tree is almost half the size of an Olympic swimming pool. Despite its age, it's not the oldest one. There are redwoods in the park that appeared 3,000 years ago. And the tallest tree in the world grows here, in California. It's a redwood that belongs to the sequoia family. It's called Hyperion. This is 1/3 of the Eiffel Tower's height. Just imagine what kind of view you can see from the tree's top. Now Susie is on the island of Madagascar. She's going to see unique baobab trees. They look like something has ripped them out of the ground, turned them upside down, and shoved them back in. Baobabs are some of the most beautiful trees in the world. Most of them are here in the Alley of Baobabs, but you can also find them in Australia and South Africa. Their tree trunks resemble sponges. They expand and absorb moisture during the rainy season. Elephants like to drink it. They tear off and chew the trunk's parts to quench their thirst. At night, flowers bloom on the baobabs. They smell like sour milk and attract bats. But the most interesting thing is that the baobab doesn't dry out and doesn't fall like other trees after the end of its life. It crumbles, settles, and leaves a pile of pieces on the ground.
Welcome to Rapa Nui, better known as Easter Island. It's a tiny speck in the vast Pacific Ocean, 2,200 miles away from the coast of Chile. This island is most famous for its eerie moai statues. This place is also home to one of the most mysterious writing systems in the world, called Ronga Ronga. We found it on 27 small wooden tablets. For years, historians have been arguing about the true history of these tablets, and now we might have found the truth. Humans first set foot on this island in the 12th century. For many years, it was home to the Rapa Nui people. They were pretty isolated out there in the Pacific Ocean until Europeans arrived in the 1720s. Europeans brought with them lots of troubles, leaving only a small fraction of the native population alive. Later in the 19th century, a missionary, Eugene Iro, went to the island and discovered the wooden tablets with intricate symbols carved on them. He wrote how marvelous they are, but there are hundreds of them on the island, and that they can be found in every household. But unfortunately, not all of them survive to this day. We've only got 27 of them. Some of them were heavily weathered, burned, or otherwise damaged, and now they're scattered all over the world in museums and private collections. Some of the language's artifacts were carted off to Tahiti and then to Europe by Europeans, leaving none behind on Easter Island itself. The 4 sacred tablets found their home in a congregation in Rome. They were the ones used in the recent discovery. For years, historians have been arguing whether this writing system was made up by the islanders themselves or they borrowed it from Europeans. To find the truth, they decided to use a technique called radiocarbon dating. All organic materials, like wood, charcoal, and so on, contain a tiny amount of a radioactive form of carbon called carbon-14. When life comes to an end, things stop taking in carbon-14, and the amount they had starts to decay over time. By measuring how much carbon-14 is left in a sample, we can assume how old this sample is. This is how we learn the age of many fossils and artifacts. So, they looked at the age of some Ronga Ronga tablets. 3 of them were crafted from trees grown in the 18th or 19th century, which aligns with the arrival of Europeans. However, one of them is older than the Europeans' first visit to the island. There are 2 reasons to believe that Rapa Nui people created this writing system themselves. First, Ronga Ronga works differently from European languages. Decoding it is a pretty hard task. Unlike English, this language boasts over 400 unique glyphs, none of which resemble any known writing system. There were many attempts to decipher this language, and none of them were successful so far. And second, one of the tablets is shown to be from around the 15th century, before the Europeans arrived. The problem is that radiocarbon dating can only tell us when the wood the tablet was made from was cut down, not when the writing was put on it. And since we've only got one tablet to go by, this isn't enough to be completely sure. On the other hand, why and where would they preserve cut wood for over 200 years just to grab it and write something on it one day? But anthropologists and historians say that it's possible. Scarce wood resources might have led the islanders to reuse old driftwood, which could be centuries older than the writing itself. This is known as the old wood problem in archaeology. Plus, the tablet looks very preserved. It was maintained to protect it from wood-damaging insects, humidity, and so on. That's why it survived over the centuries. Whatever is written on it, it was probably important for the Rapa Nui people. Now, all of these are guesses and clues, but scientists are cautiously optimistic. They believe that ronga-ronga could be one of the rare instances of independent writing invention, like those of the Sumerians or the Egyptians. But we need more evidence. In the Rapa Nui language, rogo-rogo means to recite or to declaim. Not everyone could write, only a select few. Probably only the elite of Easter Island, mostly men, knew and could read this written language. After colonization, none of them survived. So now we have to rack our brains trying to figure out what's written here. First, scholars can't agree on what type of script it is. We aren't even sure that this was their language. But even if it was, we don't know whether it's a primitive form of writing or a fully developed system. In the 1990s, a linguist, Stephen Roger Fisher, believed he might have cracked the code of ronga-ronga structure. His idea was that these tablets conveyed cosmogonies. Cosmogonies are stories or narratives that explain how the universe was created and how natural phenomena came to be. They often come from ancient traditions and cultures, like those found in East Polynesia. The tablets could have talked about things like how the world began, where everything came from, and how different aspects of nature, like the stars or the mountains, were formed. This would also explain why only the wise elite could write. Fisher thought that ronga-ronga is a mix of logographic and semasiographic systems, which means that some symbols represent spoken words, while others represent ideas or concepts. But deciphering them would be very hard because it requires extensive memory and knowing context, because the symbols are more like hints than complete expressions. However, other language experts disagreed with his ideas, saying there were problems with how he put together his theory. Unfortunately, Fisher couldn't prove this hypothesis. Maybe these are just drawings. If we look at the tablets, there are some things that look recognizable: people, animals, plants, and geometric shapes. There are some birds. One of them looks like a frigate bird, which Rapa Nui people associate with the deity Maki Maki. There are also fish, centipedes, and so on, or at least these glyphs look like them. Could it be just art or a form of decoration? Maybe, but there are some problems. The glyphs show a high degree of complexity and structure. They also keep the same style. For example, there are several symbols that show something human-like with a raised hand. The only difference is different heads. As if it wasn't complicated enough, this unique writing style also uses a system known as reverse boustrophodon. This means that each alternate line is flipped upside down, resembling nothing seen elsewhere. We don't know why they would turn the tablet upside down after each line. But all this shows that they had some sort of system and organization behind these symbols. Plus, it seems like they use these tablets every day for some practical purpose. But there's some hope for the future. New technology, like AI and other computer programs, might help us understand lost languages. We already started creating algorithms that could help us solve other mysteries, like the Voynich manuscript. Academics even organized the Vesuvius Challenge, a machine learning competition that, in 2023, cracked the riddle of the ancient Herculaneum scrolls. The scrolls were buried under volcanic mud after the catastrophic eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD. In real life, the scrolls are very fragile, so deciphering them would be a very hard task. But with digital scanning and machine learning, it's much easier. They have a rich history. They most likely belong to the personal library of an Epicurean philosopher named Philodemus. These scrolls contain very important insights into Greek philosophy and Latin literature. If we decipher more of them, we'll learn more about the rich history of the Roman Empire.
Even in 2023, you can still find places where modern humans have never been. Imagine living on one of such isolated islands. You wouldn't know about modern civilization or have seen a person from the outside world. One such island is located in the Bay of Bengal in India. It's called North Sentinel Island, and getting there is strictly forbidden by law since the mid-20th century. Even if you try to reach there, the Indian Coast Guard won't allow it. But that's not the only hurdle you'll face. Say you have decided to reach this island in a small boat. The water is crystal clear, and you can see all sorts of fish swimming around as well as some gorgeous coral reefs. And then you see the island in the distance. It looks like a dream come true. But before you can even think about getting any closer, you notice some dots on the shore. Suddenly, something whizzes past you and lands in the water. Wait a minute, is that an arrow? Yep, and the next one hits the side of your boat. Looks like someone on the island really doesn't want visitors. Turns out the dots on the shore are people, the local Sentinelese tribe, armed with spears and bows. They start shouting something at you in a language you can't understand, but their gestures imply that you should leave immediately. If that wasn't clear enough, they throw spears and shoot arrows at you. Yeah, that's definitely a clue you're not welcome here. It's not just you they're aggressive towards, though. They're known for guarding their island fiercely and don't want anyone else to come in. Even helicopters can be attacked when they fly too close. That's why the authorities have made it illegal to visit the island. It's not just to keep tourists safe, but also to protect the islanders themselves. The Sentinelese people have lived in isolation for thousands of years, and they have no immunity to modern diseases. Even a simple cold could wipe them out. Despite the risks, some people have tried to make contact with the Sentinelese tribe. They want to befriend them and learn about their way of life. And in some cases, they have succeeded, but it's definitely not recommended. You never know how the locals will react. Interestingly, North Sentinel Island was visited by an officer named Maurice Vidal Portman in 1880. He found that the island was surrounded by coral reefs and limestone, and had fertile soil perfect for growing coconut palms. He spotted several villages on the island, but didn't approach the locals or explore the island further. Maybe he sensed that it was best to leave this paradise alone. In the past, researchers have attempted to establish friendly relationships with them by offering them fish as gifts, which the locals accepted, but still refused to allow any visitors to approach their home. Despite their complicated language, modern people were able to communicate with the islanders over several decades, and in 1991, one of the locals approached the boat that was carrying the gifts for the tribe and accepted them. In the same year, a group of locals even boarded the boat and took a bag of coconuts brought to them by a team of anthropologists. This was one of the last positive interactions with the tribe, as India's government has prohibited any interaction with the Sentinelese for their safety. There is another beautiful island located 25 miles off the coast of Brazil, which has a lighthouse that serves as evidence of modern humans' presence. However, there are no people on the island, and the Coast Guard occasionally check the lighthouse to ensure that no strangers have visited the place. People are not allowed to visit this island for their own good since it can be dangerous. So, what's wrong with Snake Island? The name will give you a hint. It's got like 4,000 snakes all over the place. Basically, one every 10 square feet. They slither on the ground and hang from the trees. And these are not just any snakes, but some of the most venomous in the world. They're called golden lanceheads, and they only live on this island. The snakes are so savage that they specialize on hunting birds that come here to rest during their long flights. The island used to be connected to Brazil, but it got separated by the sea about 10,000 years ago, and since then these snakes have ruled the roost. They're the kings of the island, and they have no predators to fear, but they don't have a lot of food options either, so they evolved to have super venomous bites to take down their prey easily. Anyway, enough about snakes. Let me tell you about another creepy island in Mexico. It is located in one of the canals in the area called Xochimilco, just 11 miles away from Mexico City. It's not forbidden to visit or anything, but it's pretty scary anyway. So have you heard of the Island of the Dolls? It's a creepy place filled with dolls hanging from trees and buildings. A guy in the 50s moved here alone from Mexico City and started hanging them up, and continued to do so for decades, making the place look like a haunted doll graveyard. But wait, it gets even creepier. The dolls have deteriorated over time, covered in moss and turned green. Some say they come to life at night. If that doesn't give you the heebie-jeebies, I don't know what will. Now let me tell you about Bouvet Island, one of the most mysterious places on Earth. It's located in the South Atlantic Ocean, 1,600 miles away from South Africa and 1,100 miles from Antarctica. It's super difficult to reach, and normally you can only do so from large ships passing by. The island is almost entirely covered by a glacier, and at its center, there is a volcanic crater. The only inhabitants of this place are penguins and seals. It's a perfect location for someone who wants to be alone, away from civilization. It was discovered in 1739 by a French explorer, but they didn't write down the location, so for almost 70 years nobody knew where it was. In the early 19th century, it was rediscovered, but it wasn't until 1927 that someone actually set foot on its shores. Fast forward to the mid-20th century, and some people decide to build a weather station there. When they arrived, they found something super weird, an empty lifeboat just chilling in a lagoon with a bunch of seals. It was in good shape, and there were oars and a buoyancy tank nearby. There weren't any markings or signs of who it belonged to, but it seemed like whoever had been on it had escaped from a wrecked ship. Strange thing though, there were no footprints or signs of people on the island, so where did the sailors go? Nobody knows. Let's finish with a completely safe and cute island in the Bahamas called Pig Beach. It's not the official name of the place, but everyone calls it this way because the island is home to lots of pigs. They spend their days swimming, sunbathing on the beach, exploring the jungle, and begging tourists for food. What's really cool is that you can stay at a hotel on a nearby island and take a boat to visit the pigs. They're super friendly and love attention, especially when there's food involved. And thanks to the kindness of tourists and locals, these cute little pink and brown piglets are able to survive on the island. No one knows for sure how the pigs ended up on the island. According to legend, they survived a shipwreck and swam to safety on Pig Beach. There are also a few cats and goats on the island, which adds to the animal farm vibes it's giving out. So if you're looking for a unique and adorable experience, Pig Beach is definitely worth a visit. Just remember to bring some snacks for the piggies.
Question for you. Does the island of Hy-Brasil sound familiar? You've surely never seen it on a vacation brochure. Not because it's exclusive or hard to reach, but because it's like the ultimate mashup of myth and reality. Some people believe it's just a figment of imagination, while others swear they've seen it with their own two eyes. According to historians, the island of Hy-Brasil has been noted in both travelers' records and ancient Irish legends. It makes this location an Irish version of Atlantis, although it's known by several other names too. The island takes its most famous name from Brisal, an important figure in Celtic folklore. It's also been spotted on maps dating back to 1325. One cartographer, for example, placed it west of Ireland, while subsequent sailing charts have shown it more specifically southwest of Galway Bay. Now, here's where things get even weirder. Two people have claimed to have found the island on their separate voyages. They returned home with almost identical descriptions of Hy-Brasil, which they dubbed the Promised Land. A Catalan map from around 1480 also places the island in the southwest of Ireland, confirming a similar location for this mythical place. Now, here's the craziest part of all. Hy-Brasil is said to appear on maps as a perfect circle with a semicircular channel through the center. Two explorers claim they separately walked the shore of the island to determine where it ended, but they never found it. Most likely, looking at those drawings, even if the island ever existed at one point, they were just walking in circles. One of the most famous visits to Hy-Brasil was in 1674 by a British captain named John Nesbitt of Killybegs. He and his crew were in familiar waters west of Ireland when the fog suddenly appeared in their path. When it lifted, they found themselves dangerously close to rocks. The ship anchored nearby, and 4 crew members rowed ashore to visit Hy-Brasil. They spent a whole day there, and even came back with silver and gold given to them by an old man who they claimed lived there. Legend has it that another sighting of this mythical place was several years later, when a fellow claimed to have met an old man who had been there himself. Could he be the same old man from the previous story? Now, this old man remembered spending a couple of days chilling on Hy-Brasil and even seeing on the horizon some familiar places from the west coast of Ireland while walking on its shores. Another man went on a trip in 1872 to find this mysterious island, and he swore he had seen it too. It was right there in front of him. But then, as quick as a wink, it vanished into thin air. Was this island ever real? That's up for debate. We can't deny, though, that there are so many stories and legends about this place that it's hard not to be curious. We've only recently figured out that this next island doesn't exist. Does Sandy Island ring any bells? It's been causing quite a stir since 2012, when it was discovered that the island, which was previously featured on maps, including Google Earth, was just a figment of our collective imagination. People had been searching for this phantom island for years. It was recorded at one point by a British ship way back in 1876 and even appeared on a British map in 1908. Though numerous expeditions had failed to find the island, it remained on some maps until it was finally removed. But how did we finally figure out that Sandy Island was just a myth? Well, a group of scientists from the University of Sydney decided to take matters into their own hands and visually confirm the island's existence. Maybe even take a photo or two while they were there, right? But when they arrived at the supposed location, they found the ocean sitting there all by itself with no piece of land in sight. Most likely the crew of the British ship may have just mistaken a pumice raft for an island. Pumice rafts are floating rocks that form from volcanic activity and are known to float past the area where Sandy Island was supposed to be. Let's move on to this next story about another fictitious island, a tale about a fellow named Robert Peary. You see, back in the day, Peary was trying to gather some money to fund his much-wanted Arctic expedition. So, what does he do? Well, he decides to create a whole new island out of thin air. Talk about creative marketing, or a scam, take your pick. Peary called this mythical island Crockerland, after his pal George Crocker, who had given him some money for one of his previous expeditions. Peary claimed to have discovered this island during his 1906 trip to the Arctic, but it was all a big fib to try and get more investments from his buddy. Peary even went so far as to write a book about his fake discovery called Nearest the Pole. Surprisingly, people did fall for it. Other explorers even started searching for the fictitious island. Despite it never existing at all, Crockerland appeared on maps created between 1910 and 1913. It was even referred to as a whole continent in some circles. People were so intrigued, they even named it the Lost Atlantis of the North. Eventually, Peary's little scheme was uncovered, and the truth about Crockerland was revealed. This next mysterious island also seems to enjoy playing hide-and-seek with its visitors. Back in 1821, a man claimed he stumbled upon an island close to Antarctica and decided to give it a special name, Emerald Island, after his ship. But this island seems to have a bit of a quirky personality, as it likes to disappear whenever it feels like it, leaving explorers scratching their heads and wondering if they're losing their marbles. Some people claim they've seen the island with their very own eyes, while others say it's nothing but a myth. Some say it moves around like a sneaky ninja, which is why it's so hard to find. Recollections may vary, sure, but here's where things start to get fishy though. Even those who claim to have seen Emerald Island can't seem to agree on what it looks like. Some tell stories about a towering mountain with cliffs, while others insist it's a lush green forest with rolling hills. One captain even claimed it was small and rocky, with no place to land. Despite all the confusion, there have been a couple of interesting incidents around the supposed location of the island. In 1894, a Norwegian expedition to the South Pole thought they had finally found the elusive island, only to realize it was just an iceberg. In 1949, the crew of a ship from New Zealand got excited when they spotted what they thought was Emerald Island, but it turned out to be a group of clouds hanging out on the water. This next island was supposedly found by a certain Captain Daniel Doherty. He claimed to have stumbled upon an island far south in the Pacific Ocean during a trip from New Zealand to Canada in 1841. He named it Doherty Island, after himself, of course. Several other sailors also claimed to have seen the island, confirming its existence. However, one Captain Scott couldn't find it when he passed by its supposed location in 1904. Did it magically disappear? The icing on the cake came on August 11, 1931, when an Australian newspaper reported that a joint British, Australian, and New Zealand expedition sailing to Antarctica passed by the supposed location of Doherty's Island and couldn't find it. The commanding officer of the ship noted the details of the incident, stating that the vessel passed directly above where the island was said to be. The weather was clear, and there was no island within a considerable radius, so it couldn't have been hiding anywhere else. And, just like that, Doherty Island was removed from British maps in 1937 as if it never existed. Hey, sometime, remind me to tell you the story of Brightside Island. a fanciful place located smack dab in the Internet Ocean. Now, all the islands can be easily tracked by coordinates, but it's not the case with these Peruvian islands. These floating islands occupy a corner of Lake Titicaca, the world's most navigable lake. The cool thing about Uros Islands is that these islets are human-made. They were built by layering totora roots and reeds. Totora is water-resistant, and it can be used for making boats, roofs, mattresses, and more. Also, these islets are kind of edible. You heard me right. The plant the islands are made of can be eaten, and its flowers can be used to make tea. Now, there's a serious downside, though. Every 15 to 20 days, the reeds composing the islets rot, so they need to be replaced with new ones. And it's an endless cycle of work and repair. As it's human-made, it's more of a boat than an island. Plus, the Titicaca waters can be pretty turbulent, so the locals needed to find a way to stop the islands from constantly drifting away. To do that, they stick eucalyptus rods into the bottom of the lake, and these rods serve as anchors. Now, despite the tininess of these islets, there are two languages spoken in this territory, this one and that one, neither of which I can speak, hence the subtitles. Also, people living there are pretty self-sufficient. They can even weave their own fabric and make stunning outfits out of them. Forget about mass-market clothes. Today, Uros Islands are quite modern. There are solar panels to give just enough power for light and even TVs. There's a radio station on the main island, and the best part is that the locals even rent lodges to tourists. Yep, you can book everything online. Ever since ancient times, people have always been looking for the secrets of longevity. It turns out that there's actually a conveyor belt of centenarians. Nah, not a conveyor belt for sure, but rather a geographic area famous for its inhabitants beating all the longevity records. So let's go on a trip to Okinawa. No visa and tickets are required, plus you won't get jet lag. So Okinawa has a nickname, the Hawaii of Japan, but we need to differentiate two concepts here. The Okinawa Prefecture, which is made up of more than 160 islands, and the main island, which is also called Okinawa. By the way, if you ever want to get to this island or any neighboring ones, you'll need to hop on a ferry. For those people who dislike winter, Okinawa is the perfect destination for you. Even in its colder months, the temperatures there can reach 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Yep, and ocean water is also pretty inviting. In addition to perfect weather conditions, they also seem to have a perfect diet in that archipelago. The thing is, this place is a melting pot of cuisines. There's a strong Chinese influence here, so you'll easily find Chinese delicacies on any menu. If you're more into noodles, then you can treat yourself to soba noodles. Taco rice is also popular there, and they have their particular type of seaweed, the sea grapes. They say it's the rich diet in tofu, yam, and seaweed that makes people in this area live longer than average. Now, there's already enough to make you want to visit this awesome place, but here are some more cool facts about Okinawa. For one, the first cherry blossoms can be found here. It's already possible to see the first petals in mid-January. And this locale is the birthplace of karate. So, chop chop, off we go to the next destination. This is a football field. Let's cut it in two halves. Look at one of the resulting halves. Now, imagine 100 people living there. They say Hong Kong is the busiest place on our planet, but Magingo Island seems to be no less busy than that. Different sources provide different information. Some of them say that there are 131 inhabitants, while others claim there are about 500 of them. Let's stick to the less shocking figure, but 131 inhabitants for half an acre is still mind-boggling. By the way, it's not the most peculiar thing about this island. Its location is quite interesting too. Unlike most regular islands, this one is located in Lake Victoria between Kenya and Uganda, and not in the sea or ocean. There are quite a lot of buildings for its small territory, and all of them have metal tiled roofs. If you saw it from above, you think it's a giant metal turtle floating on the water. There's barely any vegetation there. Most of the island is covered with rocks, yet there's a tiny piece of land with green grass and just a couple of small shrubs. The island is all about fish. Most men there go fishing every day, while the women hang the fish on a string to dry and save up for later or to sell. Most of the people living on the islet of Magingo make their living catching fish in the plentiful waters around the island. There are tons of fresh perches out there. Yup, there are jobs, but no hospitals, no schools, and no other public institutions. But surprisingly, there's a 12-room hotel made of corrugated iron. Also, there's a hairdresser's office where you can get stunning braids. Money circulates here, so it attracts various businesses. They even have 2 tailor shops with a variety of fabrics. Most of the buildings are made of steel, especially on the high street. There are also some makeshift huts in the alleyways. Almost all of the houses belong to the same person, Joseph, who rents them. He also owns some of the bars. There's only one building made of brick on the island. It's the house for the boat engines, and it belongs to Leonard Obala. He owns most of the fishing boats on the island. Hey, mention my name to Lenny, and you'll get a good boat. Magingo Island may be one of the most densely populated, yet it's not the tiniest inhabited island on the planet. The island of Bishop Rock, a part of the Isles of Scilly, which sounds like something right out of Monty Python. It's located 28 miles off Cornwall and may not have any grass for the sheep to feed on, but it may fit in some people. Almost 2 centuries ago, in 1847, it was decided to build a 160-foot lighthouse there. The whole construction process was quite tricky. The workers could barely find the place to step on. It took almost a decade to build it. The first lighthouse was made of steel and was never lit because it was washed away in 1850. The second attempt was more successful, with the whole construction made of stone. There are 10 floors, which are a water tank that provides fresh water for the dwellers, an entrance room with a metal door, a storeroom with a window, the first oil room that was indispensable for keeping the light in paraffin lamps. The second oil room, this one has a window, a living room with a window, a bedroom with a window, once again a storeroom, a service room, and the lamp. Whew. Any lighthouse needs a keeper, so they moved into the place in 1858, and it lit its first paraffin lamps on the 1st of September, the very same year. It meant that Bishop Rock wasn't uninhabited any longer. It wasn't the first time that the island got some dwellers. The first people appeared there back in the 13th century. It was a kind of punishment for those who were guilty of felonies. Like this, it became Britain's smallest island. It still holds a Guinness record for being the world's smallest island with a building on it. Today, the island is uninhabited because the lighthouse has been automated since 1992. So, we've had a longevity island, one of the world's densest islands, the smallest one, and never-stopping edible islands. But what about the cutest island? I'm sure everyone is going to love it, unless they're allergic to cats. There are only about 55 human residents, but over 100 four-pawed ones. They say the fluffy residents are really sweet, as they're used to being around people. So, the moment you step on the Tashirajima Island, you'll be greeted with a rub against your legs. There's even a cat shrine on that island, which is quite rare. And, wait for it, it's the cat's meow.
It's 2010. You're in the Japanese waters of the Pacific Ocean, about 745 miles south of Tokyo, and very close to the island of Iwo Jima. The sky is clear. There are almost no waves. A heavy, low rumble comes from somewhere deep under the sea. It scares away all the flying gulls. And then it gets quiet. Too quiet. It seems that even light waves don't dare to make a sound. Suddenly, a small bubble rises to the surface of the water. Then, thousands of air bubbles start moving up, one after another. The water begins to boil and heat up. Its temperature is so high that you can cook eggs or pasta in here. The boiling area grows to the size of a stadium. A huge amount of steam is released into the air. You can see an outline of some huge object through the boiling water. Then, everything stops. The water cools, the amount of bubbles goes down, and the surface of the ocean becomes calm again. That year, an underwater volcano erupted at that specific location. Fortunately, it didn't bring any serious consequences. In August 2021, the eruption repeated. But this time, everything wasn't limited to the bubbling water. The Japanese Coast Guard reported strong volcanic activity in the region. Hot steam and gases came out of the water and rose into the air to a height of 10 miles, which is about twice the height of Mount Everest. the huge awakened volcano began to slowly lift to the surface. If you took a helicopter ride above this place, you'd see more and more land coming out of the water. This is not just a volcano, it's a whole island in the shape of a horseshoe. And this is just the beginning. Seismologists say this island is the tip of a huge volcano. It fills the sky with smoke and ash. The air temperature is rising. Scientists continue to monitor the situation. They believe the volcano can completely get out of the water. Nobody knows what consequences this may have. This isn't the first island that has appeared in the waters of Japan. Underwater volcanoes have erupted several times over the past century. One of the most surprising cases occurred in 2013. That year, a small piece of land was formed next to the already existing island. The underwater volcano that emerged from the water began to grow slowly. At some moment, it connected to the island. After 2 years, the area of this island increased by 12 times compared to the original size. Smoke is always pouring out of this place, and its surface is filled with red-hot lava flows. The volcano is unstable and isn't going to calm down. Such phenomena occur not only off the coast of Japan. In the 1960s, a volcano awoke on the southern coast of Iceland. For 3 whole years, it was coming to the surface and had formed an island by 1967. They called it Surtsey. Unlike the Japanese islands, this is where the volcanic eruptions ended. Now the island is one of the most inaccessible places on the planet. Only a few scientists in the world have permission to walk around this place. They want to learn how the plant and animal life of the island are formed without human intervention. This is a unique event, and here's why. Underwater volcanoes differ in their behavior from land volcanoes. They don't explode and don't release lava flows upwards. A huge amount of water above them creates high pressure. As soon as the magma gets out, the water immediately lowers it to the seafloor. Underwater eruptions don't normally cause any changes on the ocean surface. So, millions of gallons of lava sink to the bottom, cool down, and solidify around the volcano. This lava forms a thick layer of Earth's rock. To make an island appear on the surface, an underwater volcano needs a lot of magma. The next eruption creates another thick layer. Millions of years pass, and passive lava flows form mountains. Constant eruptions increase the height of the seabed. Layer by layer, the cooled lava rises higher and higher, and then, one day, it appears on the surface in the form of an island. Often, underwater volcanoes don't reach the surface and fall asleep forever. Such volcanoes are called seamounts. The tectonic activity also affects the formation of islands. The volcano has a source of magma that comes from the mantle of the planet. The tectonic plate is moving, and a volcano is placed on it, so the plate can lead the volcano away from the source of magma. When a volcano rises, it can simply move aside and no longer erupt. From the outside, the volcanic islands look like an apocalypse, lava spraying in different directions, smog and ash filling the sky. But in fact, volcanoes are not about destruction, but the creation of new life. Lava is any hot metal, but the natural lava flowing out of volcanoes is called magma. When it appears on the surface of the ground, various gases and acids instantly evaporate from it, and magma becomes lava. But underground, it's magma. These molten metals contain trace elements of almost all chemical substances that exist in nature. They enrich the land they're flowing in. Ash is also filled with many different elements. The lava hardens, the ash settles, and this creates favorable conditions for the appearance of a rich ecosystem. It can take millions of years to develop, though. The simplest bacteria appear. They feed on chemical elements coming from the volcano. When you have favorable conditions for bacteria, you get favorable conditions for bigger life forms. Birds flying by also help to develop the new ecosystem. They build nests on the island, bring tree seeds and plant spores from the continents and other islands. All this enriches life on the volcano. Volcanoes are isolated places, so unique species of animals, insects, and bacteria can appear only there and can't be found anywhere else on the planet. However, if the volcano wakes up, it can also destroy the ecosystem. The entire island can be covered with ash and simply lose all vegetation. But then, on the scorched ground, life can appear again. Hundreds of islands around the world appeared because of the eruptions of underwater volcanoes. Hawaii, Indonesia, and Iceland have them on their territory. Imagine that people settled on a similar volcanic island and built a city there, and one day the volcano woke up. It once happened 200 miles south of Tokyo. People built a beautiful town right in the center of an active volcano on the island of Hashima. In May 1785, the catastrophe began. That day was sunny, and no one could imagine what tragedy was approaching them. At some point, thousands of birds took to the air and flew away from the island. Then, the ground began to shake. A heavy, low sound came out of the town depths. Streams of smoke were coming out of the crater of a green volcano. The volcano was throwing dirt, large stones, and various debris into the sky. The disaster lasted for several weeks. Since then, more than 200 years have passed, and the volcano has never woken up again. The town was rebuilt after the disaster. Now, this place is so great, people don't want to leave, despite the risk of a new eruption. More and more residents are coming to the island. There are many thermal springs, and the waters around the island are rich in fish. But the volcano may wake up at any moment. Fortunately, meteorological and seismological services monitor the situation. A lake can also form inside the volcano, but you shouldn't swim in it. In Indonesia, on the island of Java, there's a volcano with a crater inside. It's filled with turquoise water. The magma inside the volcano consists of many molten metals and chemical compounds, and the lake gets these substances. The volcano emits sulfur dioxide gases that combine with the metallic lake. This gives the water its strong acidity and turquoise color. The steam coming from the lake is acid. When it combines with air, it ignites. This is visible at night. Sulfur accumulations flare up and illuminate everything around.
The world's largest fence spans over 3,100 miles from Queensland to South Australia. If stretched out, it could easily connect London to New York. And if you'd walk next to it, you'd need 6 months to complete the journey. It wasn't built to safeguard the Australian border. Why would it, since Aussies are just surrounded by water? It wasn't meant to protect some important building either. Its purpose is to keep some animal species away from each other. It was back in the late 1800s when Australians started building parts of this fence. They wanted to create a barrier separating the lively, bustling part of the country where cities like Melbourne and Sydney thrive from the harsh, dry outback. They used wooden posts dug deep into the ground, linked up with wire mesh standing about 6 feet tall. Some parts of the fence even have a second electrically charged layer. To make sure this fence did its job, they added some red and white lights to help guard things even at night. A team of over 20 people work full-time to keep things in check here. And every year, local authorities chip in around $750,000 to keep the construction in shape. Why all this trouble? The main reason was dingoes. These gingery, wolf-like creatures are Australia's largest carnivore mammals, and they're also apex predators. They were causing a lot of trouble to local farmers, especially in southern Queensland, where they often go after sheep. For the most part, the fence has been doing its job okay, but it's not foolproof. Some dingoes still manage to sneak through. Other times, wild camels end up crashing into it. That's because Australia has quite a massive camel population roaming around. But this man-made solution did more than locals expected. They thought there would just be fewer dingoes within the fence, but fewer dingoes mean more kangaroos. And more kangaroos mean more competition with the sheep for food. It's not just the bigger species feeling the squeeze. The smaller animals and the greenery also went through changes. With all this competition in a smaller space, locals noticed less diversity in the plant life and small animals. The soil became less nutritious over time, affecting plant growth. Plus, the fence acts as a roadblock for animal migration and seed dispersal. Even the sand dunes are feeling the effects, with less grass cover to hold things together. When scientists looked at kangaroos on both sides of the fence, they noticed that the young pups inside were lighter and tinier on average. The outsiders had bigger feet and heads for their age, and it wasn't because they were eating a different diet. The kangaroos that were stuck sharing the land with dingoes had to bulk up faster to survive. On the flip side, those inside the fence took it slower because they weren't under the same type of pressure. These had to compete with a lot of other creatures for food, so a bigger size wasn't a priority anymore. Researchers are still not sure if this difference is a quick fix or a long-term gene adaptation. What about domesticating dingoes? Wouldn't that help? Many think dingoes were once pets in Australia, but it's not known for sure. These days, they're pretty wild, just like wolves, hyenas, or coyotes. Most of them don't need packs to survive and are solitary hunters with sharp instincts built in. So taming them isn't going to be easy. Still, taking down the construction is not an option for now. Australians are so strict when it comes to making sure dingoes are kept away that they even put laws in place for people who mess up with the fence. Leaving a crossing gate open can put people behind bars for up to 3 months. Damaging the fence can cost people 6 months' worth of their freedom. It wasn't the first time Australians thought a fence could help with animal issues. Before they needed it for dingoes, they experienced a serious bunny invasion. Cute as they are, rabbits were damaging the land used for farming, so locals thought of a 3-part fence. The first one stretched all the way from Ravensthorpe in the south to Pardue Station on the Pilbara coast. It was over 1,100 miles long, making it the longest unbroken fence globally at the time. All these bunny problems could have been traced back to a man named Thomas Austin. Back in 1859, when he first came to the land down under, he thought it would be a good idea to release a few rabbits into the wild, thinking it would add a bit of charm to the place. But since rabbits aren't native to Australia, they didn't have any natural predators at the time. They're also pretty adaptive creatures, needing just some grass for feeding. They reproduce at astonishing speeds too. A mama rabbit can have 4 litters a year, with as many as 5 bunnies each. Pretty soon, their numbers boomed. By the late 1880s, the bunnies had caused so much damage that local authorities came up with a proposal. They'd offer the equivalent of almost $2 million today to anyone who could come up with a solution to this long-eared problem. Nobody claimed the prize, but a commission did gather a bit over a decade later and came up with the fence idea. Maintaining those fences was complicated. They had inspectors keeping an eye, with each one responsible for a stretch about 500 miles long. There were also these boundary riders patrolling smaller sections, using bikes at first, then switching to camels or using camels to haul buggies. They even tried using cars at one point, but they couldn't handle the rough terrain and constantly had punctured tires. In terms of its effectiveness, well, by 1902, rabbits were already hanging out on the wrong side of the fence. That's why, 4 years later, they put up another one. It worked for a while, so much so that the local authorities didn't bother helping out farmers past that second fence with rabbit netting loans. Those caught between the two fences, however, still had a rough time dealing with rabbit trouble. Soon enough, rabbits spread even over fence number 2, and it was clear the solution didn't work. In some areas, even while the fences were being built, those sneaky bunnies found their way past them. To this day, the rabbit population still sometimes puts the Australian officials through rough times. The dingo fence may be the longest one, but it's not the weirdest. The aquarium fence in Turkey might take that prize. This 164-foot aquarium fence was built to make sure the expensive villa's ocean view would be visible from every one of its levels. These days, it gathers a lot of tourists from all over the world, eager to see the variety of fish it contains, and even the octopuses. Putting up a see-through structure wasn't hard. The real challenge was connecting the aqua fence to the Aegean Sea through a buried pipeline stretching across 13,000 feet of land. This ensures water constantly flows, keeping the aquarium clean and the fish happy. To make sure no one damages the delicate fence or steals any of the fish or two, the owner also invested in security. He installed a network of 17 cameras equipped with facial recognition. Visitors are free to look and take pictures, but step too close and you're likely to trigger alarms. Another one of those weird fences is New Zealand's Bra Fence. If you ever find yourself through central Otago, you might stumble upon a fence adorned with bras of all kinds of shapes, sizes, and patterns. Its story takes us back to 1999, when people in the area found 4 bras mysteriously hanging on the fence near Cardrona Valley Road. Some were a bit surprised, but then others started adding their bras to the decor. Some more bras appeared, and it became a must-see spot for tourists. Its popularity was so high that at times it caused traffic problems in the area.
Have you ever heard of an island that is regularly attacked by sharks? For many years, people living there haven't been able to find a way to stop this. Neither can they understand why sharks come there so often. So, what's going on? Why do these predators keep bothering this specific island while completely ignoring the others in the area? Let's go to this mysterious place and try to find out. July 22nd, 2015. The ocean waters near Reunion Island were clear and transparent. The western part of the island, St. Lou, had always been a great spot for surfing. But on this pleasant sunny day, one of the locals almost lost his life. A 6-foot bull shark appeared out of nowhere. Once right next to the shore, it suddenly charged at surfer Rodolphe Arriagui. His friend, doctor and professor of geography at the University of La Réunion, Erwan Lagabriel, was nearby, talking with 2 other surfers at that moment. Suddenly, they heard some noise. Realizing that it was his friend, Lagabriel rushed to help. The shark was 65 feet away from him. He said that all of this felt like some kind of a horror movie. He rushed to Arriagui, even though he didn't understand what exactly had happened. At first, Arriagui's body was surrounded by white foam. It then began to turn pink, and then red. Lagabriel said later that it had been one of the scariest things he had seen in his life. Fortunately, when he swam closer, the shark had already been gone. Lagabriel knew that in most cases, a second attack doesn't happen, so he hurried to help his friend. It took them some time to get back to the shore. When Lagabriel pulled his friend onto the beach, he immediately made a tourniquet from a surfboard leash. After that, Monsieur Arriagui was rushed to the hospital. Fortunately, this story has a good ending. Although the 45-year-old man lost his arm, he still survived. But he was one of the few lucky ones, because this horrifying story is just one of dozens that happened on Reunion Island in recent decades. Reunion Island is one of the regions of France. It's located right near Madagascar, together with its neighbor, Mauritius. They're both located at the same latitude as Australia. These 2 islands are very similar. They have almost the same climate and natural conditions, similar languages and cultures. But there's one huge difference between the 2 of them. In Mauritius, people can relax and have fun in the warm waters of the Indian Ocean, swimming with scuba gear and watching dolphins. Meanwhile, on La Réunion, locals are afraid even to put their fingers in the water. But why is that? Unfortunately, Reunion now has a strong reputation as a shark island. By 2018, 56 attacks had occurred there. From 2011 to 2016, the number of these cases accounted for 16% of the worldwide shark attacks. Now there are warning signs everywhere on Reunion. Local citizens and fishers have begun to discuss the options of large-scale shark trapping. The authorities forbid people to swim almost everywhere, except for a few more or less safe places, like, for example, a coral lagoon. And still, any fisher or scientist knows that sharks can easily get inside these coral rings. In other words, locals and tourists can't feel completely safe anywhere on the island. Meanwhile, in Mauritius, the last shark attack happened in the 1980s. People come here to relax, and everything is perfectly fine. So the question is, why in the world is La Réunion so unlucky? Dr. Lagabriel, the hero I mentioned before, set himself the goal of explaining this strange phenomenon. His study showed that over the past 30 years, the probability of a shark attack on Reunion had increased by 23 times. And in 9 out of 10 cases, it turns out to be a bull shark. If you haven't heard about it, This creature looks exactly like what you would imagine when you hear the word shark. It's one of the most popular species and the one that you often see in different movies and cartoons. These sharks live in tropical and subtropical waters in all oceans. Most often, they're found, yeah, you've probably already guessed, in the southern waters between Australia and South Africa. This place is even nicknamed a shark highway because these predators really like to chill around there. This is also one of the most aggressive shark species, and it's very dangerous for humans. Unfortunately, it's also very tolerant to different water salinity, which means they can basically swim even in fresh water and be totally cool with it. But why do all these Reunion Island attacks happen so often? Well, there are many theories and many different factors that might play their role in all this. Marc Soria, a researcher at the IRD, the French National Institute for Research and Development, decided to conduct a study together with his team. They spent 3 years trying to collect data on 45 tiger sharks and 38 bull sharks living in local waters. The National Research Institute of France supported this study. It was also funded by 3 research foundations: regional, national, and European. That's when you know that the problem is serious. And now, here are the main theories developed by Soria's team and La Gabrielle. The first one is excessive fishing. Experts suggest that long-term fishing and catching small reef sharks, which competed with dangerous sharks for food and territory, eventually led to these dramatic consequences. Unfortunately, when predatory bull sharks ran out of food, they just had to go looking for it near the coast. For bull sharks, surfers on Reunion look like sick, weakened fish, and therefore an easy meal. Also, while in Mauritius, surfers tend to hang out near sandy beaches. On Reunion, they choose places where waves break at coral reefs. But this is exactly where the sharks choose to search for food. So, yeah. The second possible reason is muddy waters. Bull sharks like such conditions very much, and although there are no natural places like these on Reunion, the reason could be the construction of urban areas. Muddy freshwater gets into bays from cities. This water attracts sharks, and this is where the attacks take place most often. But then we can ask again, why not Mauritius? Urbanization is also in full swing there after all. There are many places in Mauritius where sewage waters flow into the ocean. Well, then we can conclude that this is not the only factor. There have to be others. For example, there is an active volcano, Piton de la Fournaise, on Reunion Island. Thanks to this beautiful volcano, there are rich flora and fauna on the island. And this could be great if it didn't attract too much attention from predators. Because of the volcano, the shores of Reunion are less steep, which makes it easier to swim closer to the coast. And sedimentary rocks that get washed away from the slopes of the volcano can attract bull sharks. As we already know, these guys love muddy waters. There are some other theories. For example, La Gabrielle suggests that attacks may be connected to an increase in the shark population. Or maybe that's because these creatures become more aggressive during mating periods. Some people assume that all of this could be Mauritius's fault because they banned catching and selling sharks for meat. But Soria and other experts strongly disagree with this. Not many people on both islands bought this meat to make any significant difference. Anyway, this whole situation caused a lot of tension on Reunion. A big part of the population now supports the idea of catching sharks on a large scale. They also built some underwater fences near the island, and the maintenance of these fences costs $1 million a year. It may seem pretty extreme, but drastic times require drastic measures. But despite all these terrible stories, in general, sharks aren't nearly as dangerous as we think. They almost never attack divers, unless a person provokes them. Experienced divers often compare sharks with stray dogs. These animals shouldn't be feared, but should be respected. Anyway, let's hope that La Reunion will be able to solve this problem, and people will be able to swim in its warm, beautiful waters again.
Well, you're on a ship when you notice some water foaming nearby. It looks as if a huge vessel has just sunk there, but you don't see any debris. Steam is rising over the water and large bubbles appear on the surface. In a couple of minutes, you see a small piece of land appear right in front of your eyes. It's releasing flames and lava. Millions of gallons of water evaporate in the mouth of the volcano. Frightened, you get away from this place. For the next 3 years, the small island covered with volcanoes will be slowly emerging from the water. Every day, it'll erupt and fill the sky with black ash. When the ash settles, it'll get mixed with the water and form the shore. This eruption lasted 3 years, and finally, by 1967, the island of Surtsey on the southern coast of Iceland was fully formed. Surtsey is one of the few islands that have emerged from the depth to the surface of the sea. But it's almost impossible to get here. The island has a unique ecological system, and scientists want to find out how it's going to develop without human influence. Only a few people from all over the world have permission to walk around the island. This next place looks unwelcome from afar. We're now in Australia, in the Tasman Sea. Here, a huge ridge resembling a sharp fin of a giant shark sticks out of the water. The height of this mountain is 1,800 feet, which is almost twice the height of the Eiffel Tower. This place is called Ball's Pyramid. It's located in the center of an uninhabited volcanic island. It's difficult to get here because of the inaccessible rocky landscape of the place. The island was first discovered in 1788. At that time, I wasn't around then, it was considered barren and devoid of life. But more than 200 years later, in 2001, a group of scientists arrived at the island, and they found some incredible creatures there. They accidentally discovered the rarest insect in the world. It happened when the researchers reached the island, climbed to the height of more than 100 feet, and spotted a bush. Under it, they saw a colony of bugs known as land lobsters, or walking sausages. These creatures belong to the family of stick insects. Each of them is about 6 inches in length. This is the length of a spicy bratwurst. Add a little mustard and relish? Yum! Oops, back to bugs. That day, people found 27 insects, but since then, their population has begun to increase. These creatures were believed to have become extinct in the early 20th century. But to the contrary, they somehow managed to get to the Ball's Pyramid and survive. Our next stop is Brazil, almost 93 miles from the center of Sao Paulo. That's where you can find an island that's almost impossible to get to. But if you succeed, you're unlikely to leave it. It's called Snake Island. There's no other place on the planet with such a high concentration of snakes. According to researchers, there are about 5 snakes for 10 square feet of land there. They are the only owners of the island, since no other animals can survive among them. Snakes there are one of the most venomous species in the world, the golden lanceheads. These snakes are about 1.5 feet in length. Their venom is very powerful and fast-acting. If you let this reptile bite a raw piece of meat, the place around the bite will start to melt. Wow, count me out. Now imagine you're on this island and the snakes don't bite you. The most interesting thing that you can find there is an old lighthouse. It's hidden in the dense foliage of trees. People lived on the island a long time ago. Rumor has it that the last keepers were in the lighthouse when snakes broke in. No one has lived there ever since. How these unique snakes appeared on the island is still a mystery. The most popular legend claims that a pirate came there a long time ago. He hid a treasure somewhere on the island. Then he left the snakes in the spot where the chest was hidden. The pirate hoped the reptiles would scare people away from his gold coins and jewelry. Since then, a few snakes have managed to increase their population thousands of times, and some of them, reportedly, are wearing jewelry. Nah, not really. If you ever wanted to get to the island for some reason, the patrol services would stop you. Only a few people in special protective suits can get there to conduct scientific research. The next island is located 17 miles south of the center of Mexico City. You can easily get here. There are no poisonous animals, nobody guards the place, and the island's landscape allows you to moor a boat. But most likely, you'll want to leave this place as soon as you walk there for a while, especially if you arrive at night. Dolls are hooked on trees all over the island. These toys have different clothes, different sizes, and different faces. You can find dozens of dolls on almost every tree. In the middle of the 20th century, one of the residents of Mexico City moved to this island and began to fill it with toys. He picked the dolls up from landfills and canals all over the island. It took him several decades to decorate each tree. In the beginning, it looked strange and interesting. Thousands of tourists came here to see the island. Then, the dolls began to age and rot. Rains and hot sun deformed their faces. Covered with moss, they started to take terrible shapes. But the worst thing is that some people believe these dolls come to life at night. Imagine wandering alone on this island under the light of the moon and suddenly noticing a hanging doll without one eye. Ew! It's turning its head in your direction. A second later, you're already jumping into the boat and sailing away as fast as possible. One of the most unsafe and inaccessible places on Earth is located in the waters of the Bay of Bengal. This is North Sentinel Island. It's a small piece of land that looks like a tropical paradise. But you won't get here for two reasons. Since 1956, any trips to this island have been prohibited by law. There are always several ships going around and patrolling the area. The second reason is located on the island itself. Imagine you've managed to get past the patrol boats. You're sailing on a small boat to the shore. Crystal clear water surrounds you. You can even notice passing fish and beautiful coral reefs. Ahead, you see the golden coast and bright green trees, and among them, you notice small dots. You get closer, and an arrow whizzes by a few inches away from your face. The next arrow is stuck in the wooden hull of the boat. The dots you noticed before are people, the local Sentinelese tribe. They're standing with bows, releasing arrows, and throwing spears at you. They are screaming something and waving their hands. You understand they are not happy to see you and will do everything to prevent you from reaching the shore. The Sentinelese have long been isolated from the whole world and are now defending their island in such an assertive way. They don't seem to be afraid of anything. Once, a helicopter flew to the island, and the locals still threw their spears and shot arrows at it. It's forbidden to approach the place, not only because it's unsafe for tourists, but also to protect the local tribe from the dangers of civilizations. People from the continent can easily bring some disease to the island and infect its inhabitants. The locals don't have immunity, even from the flu or a simple cold, never mind smartphones. In addition, the island is surrounded by a coral reef, and this makes it very difficult for large ships to reach the shore. Despite all the prohibitions and the danger, many people have tried to get to the island. In 1880, an officer got to the shore and discovered that the soil there was ideal for growing coconut palms. The man also found several villages on the island, but didn't dare to meet with the locals. Eventually, he left this place, alive. Since then, many more attempts have been made to get to the island. Many times, researchers and travelers gave the islanders gifts, like fish or coconuts. The locals accepted these presents, asked for more, but still didn't allow foreigners to approach their homes. It's also difficult to make friends with the local tribe because they communicate in one of the most complex languages in the world. Scientists and linguists have been studying it for decades, and at the end of the 20th century, some researchers managed to make friends with the Sentinelese. In 1991, the islanders were invited to board a large ship. A team of anthropologists gave them bags with coconuts. Only several members of the tribe accepted the gifts. For centuries, the Sentinelese have been living on their own, far from civilization. And almost nobody wants to change this situation. What, and pass up the internet, fried food, and Facebook? You're kidding. Sandy Island is a creepy landmass that appeared on world maps for nearly 200 years before vanishing into thin air. Located in the South Pacific between Australia and New Caledonia, this phantom island was first documented by explorers in the 18th century and continued to pop up on maps and even scientific surveys. But when a research ship sailed through its supposed coordinates in 2012, they found nothing but open water. They even measured the ocean depth at this spot, and it was always more than 4,000 feet deep, so there was no chance of a big piece of land could be hiding under the water. To make things even weirder, when you look up its exact coordinates on Google Earth, you'll still see a faint outline of what looks like a long, thin island, but with no landmass in sight. Theories about its disappearance talk about possible cartography errors, but the mystery of how a whole island fooled the world for centuries is still unsolved. Now, speaking of mysterious islands, let's dive into the enigma of Hashima Island. Located off the coast of Nagasaki, Japan, this small island was once a bustling coal mining facility, thriving with workers and families. But as the demand for coal declined, the island was abandoned in the 1970s, leaving behind a haunting ghost town. Today, Hashima stands eerily silent, with crumbling concrete buildings and overgrown vegetation. And if you are brave enough, you can do a virtual tour using Google Earth. But there are other places where digital maps won't let you see much, like the Ward Islands in Australia. If you search for its coordinates, you'll notice a bunch of blackout spots near the coast. This has led to all sorts of wild speculation online, sparking curiosity about what might be hidden beneath the surface. I mean, is it just a glitch? Or could there really be some unusual wildlife down there? Well, we still don't have concrete answers for these obscured areas, but it is worth mentioning that this region is part of a wilderness protection area. This place is an important zone for the Australian sea lion and the New Zealand fur seal, for example. So, these blackout spots could be just part of a plan to keep everything private and protected out there. From creepy islands to abandoned places, if you ever find yourself driving through Rio de Janeiro, you might catch a glimpse of something unsettling: a group of creepy Santas, faded candy canes, and rusty slides surrounded by palm trees and dense greenery. This is Park Aba Noel, an eerie, abandoned Christmas-themed amusement park in Brazil. The park's creator had big dreams, thinking it would become a massive, eclectic attraction with different themed areas. We're talking about a space the size of 460 football fields. Work started in 2000, but the place shut down a few years later after the creator tragically passed away in a car accident just meters from the park's entrance. Today, the attractions are slowly being taken over by rust. This totally feels like something out of a sci-fi movie, but those multicolored rings are actually right here on Earth, in Yellowstone National Park to be exact. At 370 feet in diameter, it is the largest hot spring in the United States and the third largest in the world. When you see it from above, the different colors come from various types of bacteria that act like real-life thermographic filters. Each type of bacteria thrives at different temperatures, and their colors reflect the heat levels in different parts of the spring. Our next stop is in Italy, where you can find the Villa Devaki, also known as the Red House or the Ghost Mansion. For every ghost mansion, there's an urban legend behind it. Now, while nothing we're about to say is confirmed, the tale is still pretty interesting and downright bizarre. Built in the mid-19th century by Count Felix Devaki, this once grand summer residence quickly became the site of tragedy. The Count's wife passed away under mysterious circumstances, and his daughter disappeared, never to be seen again. Devastated, the Count is said to have spent his remaining days searching for answers. Over the years, the mansion fell into ruin, with local legends adding to its haunted reputation. Some claim to hear strange noises or see ghostly figures, while others whisper about unusual rituals that might have taken place there. Though crumbling and overgrown, Villa Devaki remains popular for those intrigued by its eerie history. While we've explored eerie and abandoned human-made structures, let's take a look at a place where nature's forces left their own massive mark: the Meteor crater in Arizona. The site was formed in an instant about 50,000 years ago, when a large iron-nickel meteorite slammed into Earth. Measuring just under a mile wide and 560 feet deep, the crater is one of the best-preserved impact sites in the world. Standing at its edge, you can almost picture the incredible force of the impact, wiping out everything around it. Today, the Meteor crater is a fascinating geological landmark, drawing in scientists and curious visitors. From a Google Earth point of view, this area in Niger looks creepy, and what seems to be clusters of glass domes dotting the landscape, almost like an interplanetary colony. But in reality, it's kind of an illusion. Those domes are actually small semicircular pits, and they're part of the Just Dig It project. Can you dig it? These pits, known as water buns or Earth smiles, are dug to capture rainwater and restore dry, degraded land. It's a simple but genius method that helps bring life back to areas suffering from desertification. By trapping water, these bunds allow vegetation to grow again, cooling the land and reviving ecosystems. Now, you have probably heard of the famous Nazca lines in Peru, right? We're talking about those massive ancient geoglyphs carved into the desert, which have shapes like a spider, a monkey, and a hummingbird. Well, recently, something similar popped up, and it's got the internet buzzing. This new figure, located at the top of a mountain, looks a lot like a wild boar. While it's super cool to find a potential new geoglyph, the lack of solid info and the not-so-sharp edges make us think it's just a natural formation. It's still pretty intriguing, though. But if you head down south to Chile, that's where you'll actually find a real geoglyph. We're talking about the Atacama giant, which is around 390 feet tall. What looks like a funny drawing seems to represent some sort of spiritual figure or deity. There's no solid proof of what it actually means, but experts believe this design might have worked as an early astronomical calendar. The points on the top and sides of the head are said to indicate the seasons based on how they align with the moon. Meanwhile, you might also find some mysterious shipwrecks while exploring Google Earth, like the MV Plassey in Ireland. This ship met its tragic fate back in 1960 when a heavy storm and strong winds blew it ashore at Finis Rock, tearing a hole in the vessel's bottom. Water started rushing in from underneath. After some shouting and running in all directions, the crew managed to get out of the ship. Today, the vessel's remains are still at Finis Rock and have become a popular attraction. You can still see its hull, which keeps falling apart over time, making the whole scene even creepier. And we've also got something interesting involving the Titanic. Now, it's true that the ship is really 13,000 feet underwater, so you actually can't see it with satellite cameras. But if you type these coordinates into Google Earth, you'll find the spot of the Titanic accident. It's not that creepy of a place. I mean, it's really just a huge expanse of blue. But still, it's pretty interesting to get the big picture of how they seem so far from everything on that tragic night when the ship went down.